Chicago, an economic hub, a railroad empire, a beautiful city painted by its deep and insightful history, which can be seen and even heard throughout its streets today, specifically the sounds of urban blues musicians performing in Chicago's abundant jazz clubs. Chicago is only as prosperous as the people who occupy it, and urban blues musicians have been playing as Chicago's skyscrapers have been lengthening for a long time. Americans are familiar with great blues and rock and roll musicians today, like Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix. Yes, they are associated with rock and roll. Their style of music, though, derives from the earliest forms of blues music. This deriving where? No other than Chicago, the infamous city where legacies are born, specifically the legacy of urban blues. Even Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix have assimilated their musical inspirations to Chicago's earliest blues musicians like Buddy Guy, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, and many others. Such musicians as these came to Chicago in hopes of making a living off of their passion for music. They came from poverty-stricken communities. So, the city's abundance of jazz clubs and recording studios gave these musicians that chance to perform. Little did they know that Chicago became the birthplace for the legacy of blues music to prosper and be heard today. All legacies start somewhere. For the legacy of urban blues, this began somewhere else than Chicago itself. For example, Lettsworth, Louisiana, the town that blues musician Buddy Guy grew up in. It was towns like these that Chicago's blues musicians originated from. During the early 1900s, these southern communities were not as industrialized as those in the north. Buddy Guy remembers long days spent picking cotton for a living. Eventually, he dropped out of high school to support his ill mother. Despite the hardships he endured, Buddy especially remembers the thrilling joy he felt when hearing blues music playing from his family's radio once they were finally able to install electricity. It was music like this that would later draw him to Chicago. Buddy was not alone with his early life's collection of grief. Famous blues musician Muddy Waters also worked on a cotton plantation. He eventually left his job and headed for Chicago in a movement known as the Great Migration.
Got my mojo working, but it just don't work on you.
And so, blues musicians began to travel north to Chicago in hopes of making a living off of performing their music in jazz clubs. Chicago held greater economic opportunities than their own communities, so that the legacy of blues music may take place. Despite the country's economic success during the first 20 years of the century, blues music was not as popular as many conceived it to be at the time. Blues, folk records, or even known as race records, this genre of music went under the radar. Nevertheless, with Chicago's flourishing economy, the city provided so many opportunities for these musicians, but the process wasn't of rags to riches. These migrating musicians started somewhere in Chicago, a district of tenements where plenty of African Americans sheltered, and where the lights in the evening blazed, and the sidewalks crowded, many waiting to go inside the jazz clubs. Maxwell Street, located from Halsted Street to 16th Street. It was notable for its street markets, the Maxwell Street Polish sausage, and as being the heart of Chicago's blues industry. Muddy Waters performed in the jazz clubs along Maxwell Street. These jazz clubs influenced Muddy to use louder instruments than acoustic guitars, which included a piano, amplified harmonica, and an electric guitar. It was these instruments and Muddy's use of these instruments that gave urban blues a rougher and more original sound than jazz music, also known as electric blues. Chicago today. The blues capital of the world, where the lights in the evening blaze and the sidewalks crowded, many waiting to go inside the jazz clubs, still here today. And there are many more, including Buddy Guy's own jazz club entitled Buddy Guy's Legends. At the 35th Annual Kennedy Center Honors, Buddy Guy was respectfully awarded for his contribution towards the legacy of blues music in America. But what makes such a legacy live on still to this day?